So I'm delighted to welcome you to another episode of the Business of AI podcast. And today I'm joined by James Turnbull from Camino Communications. So James, welcome to the Business of AI podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tim. It's great to be here.
And I'm looking forward to discussing your particular background, which I think is in the health tech and pharma space, and really getting some examples and hearing what you've been working on there. But could you start off by giving us a bit of background to you and to Camino and you know what Camino does?
Sure, absolutely. My background is actually in technology originally. I studied computer science. I studied computer science in the very early 2000s at Edinburgh University. And AI at the time was not an exciting field to be in. The most interesting thing that happened in AI while I was at university was the building burned down. So we shared the labs between computer science and AI. And a lot of my fellow students were in the building. Luckily, they all got out. But we all got an email saying, the building's on fire, please remove yourselves. And a lot of historical texts were lost, but like it wasn't actually, AI was not at university then, a field that was really moving very fast. It felt like an AI winter. But yes, my background, as I say, was computer science. And then I got into building websites and ultimately got into building websites for the pharma industry, for healthcare. And this found me in the field of medical communications or medcomms. And now I run Camino, which is a medcomms agency, which essentially means we do content. So we do slide decks, presentations, emails, websites, everything about communications that pharma companies would do. So obviously it's highly regulated, very medical. We have lots of medical writers on our team who really will understand the disease area and how you can communicate around that. But with Camino, what we're trying to be is a medical communications agency with a technology slant, where we can use digital technologies, AI, but also the classics, websites, emails, all of these things, which have always been a little bit held back in the pharma industry. We can use these technologies to do better work, to do better communications for our clients.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for giving us that background. Really keen to get into some of that in a little bit more detail. One of the things you mentioned there, though, which I thought was quite interesting, was that sort of background on AI. Back in the day, it wasn't that sexy. It was quite sort of technical. And then you kind of accelerate to where we are today, and pretty much everything is AI, and people are calling everything AI. It's badged here, and almost to the point that it's lost its meaning. And I think that's the biggest challenges that we face as an industry, is that people don't really know what it is. And often you'll see people say, "Oh, we need AI," and they probably mean Gen AI, but they don't really appreciate the breadth of different types of technologies that they could have, which might be less sexy, but might actually answer the problem which they've got in their organization. So I wonder whether you've got a perspective on this, because I know you do quite a bit of training and you're sort of working with people in those organizations as well. Do you start off by helping them understand what AI is and kind of defining the problem?
I do, yeah. I heard an analogy the other day, which saying you want AI is like saying you want a vehicle. Like, do you mean a bike or a car or a plane? Like, they're quite different things. And AI in the same way is such a broad term. It could mean, anything from rollerblades. So yes, I do get into that definition, but we generally, as I say, work with marketing and medical leads in pharma, where their job is communication. So when they talk about AI, they really mean generative AI. I did a training for a very large pharmaceutical company quite early on, so probably mid-2023. And it was a US medical director who said, "Can you come and teach my team about how to use AI and all of these things?" And I said, "Absolutely." We did it remotely. And the day before I did the training, he called me up and he said, "Look, this is really embarrassing, but I've just learned that we've got an AI team in our company, and can you do the training with them?" So I got on this call with this proper data engineer, data scientist who had worked there for 7 years. And I said, so how is working in pharma in AI? Of course, she was doing drug research. She was doing, real machine learning. And I said, with this whole, ChatGPT coming along and everything being AI, how does that make you feel? And she was a bit like, yeah, I feel at least I'm being heard now, but being in this organization and being doing AI all this time to now suddenly it's like, it's trendy and now people want to talk to me is a little bit annoying. We did the training together. It was fine. It was actually really good because she knew so much about the detail of machine learning, and I was talking more about how you use that in your communication roles. So I learned a lot from her. But it is funny that all pharma companies have these large R&D teams, and of course they've been using AI for decades. That's what they've been doing. But now your communication side of things is going, oh, well, we've heard about ChatGPT and we're worried about this. We're scared about this. What should we be doing?
Yeah. Wow, that's a great story, and I love that. And we've spoken to quite a few companies now who are at that sort of cutting edge of using machine learning, data science, and models that they're building for drug discovery, but also for drug testing as well, just to speed up the parts of that process. So that's a sort of really interesting space, that whole kind of life sciences area. But just come back to the bit that you're working on and you're helping companies with. That's very much about sort of ensuring that people can be up to date and so remain up to date with what's coming out. And frankly, it can be quite overwhelming, can't it? Because if you're there in your job is communications or marketing, and you're trying to do what you've always been trying to do, but just do it more effectively, and suddenly you're trying to get your hands around these new technologies and the tools and the vendors. There's a lot to take on board there. So how do you help them to cope with not being overwhelmed?
Yeah, the overwhelmed is a big challenge. I start with kind of building up their personal skills. So you get this idea that AI is going to revolutionize your team or revolutionize how you do your work. And that's a huge challenge. And when you ask people like, what could you use AI for? They come up with big challenges that aren't every day. Like, oh, it could help me engage in a whole new way with a whole new audience doing something completely different. And what I generally say is, that sounds great, but let's start with something that you actually do now. Let's take a challenge that you have. A classic one is that we do a lot of work with AI on is looking at congresses. So you have a new scientific congress comes out and they publish all the abstracts online a couple of weeks before the congress. But for some congresses, that's like 6,000 abstracts. Wow. So you've got teams who are going to go to this congress where they're going to be meeting their customers. They're going to have a few symposium about their latest data, and all their competitors are releasing their latest data. So in any disease area, oncology, everything's going to happen at ASCO in 2 weeks' time. And you've got 2 weeks to work out of those 6,000 abstracts, what's going to matter. So that's a classic challenge for most pharma companies. They all have conferences that they go to. And so we found our clients, in some of these companies, there were maybe like 20 people scrabbling to try and read all these abstracts and work out what they should and shouldn't be going to and what they should and shouldn't be doing. And that was like, there's a challenge that you have, that you do, that takes lots of people's time that nobody enjoys. Maybe this is a good use for AI. In fact, this is a great use for AI. So what we've done is take all those abstracts, run them through large language models to interpret what is the specific type of cancer that's talking about. What is it? A third line, clinical trial in stage 3, yada, 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 and which pharma company is behind it. So extracting all those really key bits of information. So then we can say to our clients, we've put in a ranking process, and my team write that ranking process, but they say, of these 6,000, these 20 are really important. These 10 are the super important ones. And then they have something to go into that conference with knowledge already. And it just saves them time for that prep because you've only got that 2-week window. So if you can get them all the information in the first 2 days, rather than at the end of the 2 weeks, there's a lot more they can do. And I'm very much, I do push the idea that using AI is not just about efficiency. Because, I speak to procurement all the time. They say, oh, James, you use AI. Great. We want it for half the price. And I don't like having those conversations. It's not just about, doing stuff cheaper. So I like to say it's 3 things. You can have efficiency, but you can also have value, which means you can also do more. So just like that example I just gave, with that, the answer to what are the 20 most important papers or posters in a 2-day window, then we can do a lot more. We can write emails that go out ahead of time. We can write content to prep the field teams for the pharma company who are going to be at that conference. We can give them schedules about what they should attend and not attend. So we can still do work. We're just doing more valuable work. So yeah, I think efficiency, value, and the third thing I talk about is innovation. And that is to say, like, people want AI to be exciting and innovative, but you have to have the other two as well. Like, we've done projects that are really cool, that are using AI, that are pushing the boundaries in innovation, but they're also valuable and efficient. If you're just doing innovation, I have considered doing some projects, which is really just throwing AI at something to be flashy. If it's just that, then it's probably a waste of time as well, because you don't really learn anything at the end of the day. You've gone, I've made a flashy thing, but it's completely unapplicable to what our job is. Back to that, what is your actual challenge that you have in your job? We've made something, don't know what to do with it. So yeah, if you focus it on your actual job and those three: efficiency, value, and innovation, then I find people get much more use and value out of AI.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's a theme that I'm seeing and talking about a lot now, which is there has been such an interest in AI that often people will rush straight to the solution without thinking about the problem. And then people are surprised when those figures come out that say, 70% or 95% in that MIT study recently of AI pilots fail. And well, that's because the problem hasn't been framed properly. And actually, what that problem needed might not have been the solution that you went to, but the solution you went to using Gen AI looks sexy and you can talk about it and everyone gets excited about it. And in some ways, that's doing a disservice then, because people then think it's magic and it doesn't live up to those expectations and the hype.
You've got that high expectation. Yeah. I had one client who I won't name, who said that they'd spoken to a consultant, one of the consulting companies, who had said that AI will make them 40% more efficient. And they've taken that advice and gone, wow, we're a really forward-thinking, innovative pharma company. We're going to aim for 50% more efficient. And I said to him, that's a really high aim, but also it's impossible to measure. I use AI in my job 7 hours a day, and I can't say it's made me 40% more efficient because I don't really know. I get some things done quicker. I get some things done slower. I do different things now. It's changed how I work. Am I 40% more efficient? I don't think so, but I wouldn't know. So I think aiming for 50% efficiency in such a difficult to measure concept is you eventually that pilot will be marked as failed. But maybe actually they did some really interesting stuff.
So let's drill into that then. So when we talk about ROI, that's often something which clients, customers will want to know that they're going to get some ROI for the money they're investing. I'm sure that's something which comes up in the conversations you're having as well. So ROI has to have some metrics to be able to then quantify what you're getting a return on. But I hear what you're saying in terms of it is very hard to quantify some of these changes. But also we started off talking about sort of data and sort of measuring these kind of things. So how do you start to quantify the success for your clients and help them measure whether they're getting ROI?
Well, there's two different things there, I think. That example is having people use AI in their job, which I think is very difficult to measure. But then the example I gave of the project, which we've called Project Goldfish for confusing reasons, but the Congress Highlights project is Project Goldfish. The Goldfish project is something that we started with. Here's a job that people do. Here's a task. Here's how long it normally takes an agency to do. So we're going to be able to really easily measure how long can we do that in using AI, less time, obviously, but also how much more value can we get out of doing that process. So those metrics were really easy to set because it was much more constrained in one task. But on the other side, where you're saying jobs need to be 40% more efficient, I think that's nigh on impossible to really put clear metrics on. But I don't work in consulting, so I could be wrong.
Yeah. No, I think that's useful, and just being able to kind of have some of those metrics in place, it is useful, but they'll vary with each example, I suppose, won't they?
Yeah.
So the other part of what we were talking about before in terms of skills comes down to the individuals, and we were talking about them feeling overwhelmed, but it's important to be able to build their confidence and build up their familiarity, so they know that they know the risks, but they also feel empowered to take some of those risks because they know that's how they're going to learn, and they're not going to get punished for that. But as long as they get some data and they learn from those mistakes and they go on and then improve. And frankly, that's how the pilots should work. So how are you involved in sort of empowering some of the teams you work with to have that new mindset?
So we do workshops where we do a lot of practical work, where a lot of it is giving them the time and confidence to play with AI, to play with challenges. I'll be in workshops and I'll say, what are some jobs that you did recently, some tasks you completed? And there'll occasionally be something, or often someone will say, I've tried to use AI to do this thing and it's not worked very well. And I go, I've never tried that thing. Let's do it now. And then in a group setting, you just experiment with it. There's so much about generative AI models that we don't know how applicable it is to writing MSL field notes, until we try that, until we experiment with it. So getting the teams to sit down and go, let's try that. Yeah, let's try this other thing. Works so well. And it's great fun for the attendees, and it's great fun for me as well, because I learn loads about that too.
Yeah, no, I really like that approach there. The fact you're bringing people together and you're sort of workshopping projects that they've worked on that they haven't had success with, and then sort of almost analysing and within the workshop crowdsourcing solutions for how they could do it better, because that's something which is very real to them. They would have done it, and it sounds like they wouldn't have. Well, they would have failed effectively, but failed in a good way, in that they come and brought it in, they want to learn from it. And you're helping them to then discover how they could take it to the next level. So I really like that.
And sometimes I've been in workshops, and we had one of them. She was learning how to use ChatGPT to do better shopping. It was not in the remotest related to work, or using it to do recipes, helping plan your kids' school days. We've had all these really personal use cases that have come out of these workshops that have helped people go, all right, okay, well, I'm not sure I'm confident enough to use this in my work setting, but I'm going to go and plan all my meals using ChatGPT from now on. And I'm like, that's a success, right? That person is building their confidence with AI. And I hope that they'll come back in a few months or weeks and go, okay, well, now I will try it to write that email to my boss, or help me with, something more. So write that email to that HCP that I'm communicating with, it builds on those skills.
100%. And I'm so glad you're doing that, because we refer to this as everyday AI.
Yes,
and
it's a great term. Yeah.
To understand how they're using it in the use cases you gave there, perfect. And sometimes it's our parents' generation, sometimes it's just people who haven't seen the point of using it. But often across the UK, it's in the communities where people aren't using it. But if they were to use just basic tools like ChatGPT, it could be transformative. It could really help them to plan a meal within their budget, or to respond to a letter they've received, they don't know how to respond to it, or to interpret a contract. So many use cases that could really empower people. And I think you're right. If you start getting people using it there, then it unlocks that confidence that allows them to then level up in their workplace as well. So it's all connected. That just in terms of the way you're going to be working with businesses in particular, thinking about how you're sort of then empowering people to communicate better. Can you sort of help us understand what that process might look like? Because within the medical and the health sector, I imagine there's some fairly complex products and services that you're trying to communicate, to build awareness of, and to get new customers on board. So how are you actually using some of these AI-powered tools within those environments to solve those problems?
So within my team, we use AI in a load of ways to just speed up what they do, but also help the team kind of do better content for our clients, essentially. There's a lot of laborious tasks. For example, if you're writing about a new disease area or new product, for example, there'll be 15 clinical trials that you need to be aware of, that you need to reference, that you need to understand what the point of those was. And while you can go and read them all, if you're only looking for, well, how was this used in second line men over 40? Well, that's a great use for AI, right? To pull out where were in these 15 clinical trials, where was it used in men over 40? And then you've got an idea of what's happened there, and then you go off and use that content. And obviously the team, when they're actually referencing that, will read the actual paper. But ChatGPT will say it's on page 3 in the 3rd paragraph, right? So they've saved 10 minutes, but they've saved 10 minutes 15 times. So that's in the kind of content production. But then in the content output on the other side, one thing we've been doing a lot of is using AI for internal training. Like, internal training is, again, really important. Everybody within the pharma company needs to know everything about their products and everything about their competitors' products, and that's really heavy medical content. So we do a lot of internal training that used to be boring slide decks and like a quiz at the end. And it's the sort of, I don't know to put this politely, it's not enjoyable for anybody. It's like a tick box, right? You just have to learn this stuff. So if we use AI to put an avatar on that e-learning at the end, to have a chatbot that you can talk to, that rather than just giving you the standard kind of 4 questions to test your learning, that actually discusses your learning with you, that we find they're much more engaging, right? People use that e-learning much more. So it is a good way to help that kind of external communication. We did do a video avatar on a Congress booth as well, which kind of had 2 uses. One was about having something exciting on the booth so that passers-by would go, well, that looks interesting, and go over and engage with it, and hopefully then engage with the pharma team. But the second use was actually, it was about communicating quite a complex disease area. So it's a rare disease. It's got difficult, specifics in how it's used and etc. So we made this chatbot that you can just ask natural language questions, because rather than it being select from a drop-down as they used to be, we used AI to allow you to say, like, the test example I always used was like, how does drug work in children? Because that's not actually a question a doctor would ever ask. A doctor would talk about pediatric use cases. But the AI chatbot was able to understand my intentionally bad science talk and come up with the correct scientific answer. Now, of course, in such a heavy regulated industry, everything that chatbot said had to go through medical approval, had to be signed off by a medic. But we were able to actually get around that by pre-recording something like 200 responses that this chatbot was able to give, which you can imagine if we'd used an actual actor and filmed somebody, would have been expensive up front. But as we went through that review process, we had to update the content 5 times. So we would have had to have gone back for complete reshoots 5 times, which would have made the project impossible. So using AI to create an avatar who then spoke those answers, it made that possible, but it also made it much more engaging and, to be honest, much more fun.
Yeah, great example. I'm curious how the actual or how you're using some of those foundational models like the ChatGPT you referenced there, because presumably you want to have some additional layers on top of it. There's knowledge specific. Maybe there's some security and privacy you want to include there. Maybe there's some additional functionality. Maybe there's some fact checking, and you mentioned regulation as well, and it's a heavily regulated area. So can you just kind of explain how you're sort of building on the sort of the base ChatGPT? How you're bespoking it?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the time when we're working with like scientific papers, they're in the public domain. So that's easy. You can just put those papers in as context. And we have a team ChatGPT account. So we have shared projects across the team. So there'll be one shared project around a therapy area where multiple writers can go in, and that context is already there. Somebody's already chosen the right papers and the right scientific information so that it's got that backing within that project, if you know what I mean, and it starts from that point. In terms of the security, we've got policies. So like we don't upload our clients' commercially sensitive data to ChatGPT for obvious reasons. We don't, despite working in the pharmaceutical industry, we're a step removed from patient data. We never really worked with patient data. But of course, if a project was to come up, then we'd have to be much more careful around how we use that. And that's a concern that, when I'm training the pharma teams, they are obviously worried often about, well, I've been told I need to be careful with our commercially sensitive data, but I've also been told that we've got our own internal chatbot. So I haven't been using that. And quite often I just say, no, use your own internal chatbot. Like your IT team have said, here is a version of GPT or whatever chatbot copilot. This one you can use with your data, so use it. And they go, oh, okay, I just thought I wasn't allowed. And just that permission really unlocks a lot of opportunities that they can use their own data with their own chatbot. But you understand why there's some fear around that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It comes down to those simple things again, doesn't it? Just the simple message that you have your own copilot that's internally, or whatever the system is you're using. Some people might not have known that, but it's such a simple thing. And then just giving them that everyday literacy again to understand how they can customize it around their knowledge. And just, it's all of these things, they come back to some very simple ideas. But one other thing I wanted to kind of pick up on you, which again comes up a lot, and I'd be fascinated to see how this comes up in the pharmaceutical area as well, is around accuracy. And the question of, when you're using some of these models, how can you check the accuracy of them? Yes, they can give you sources and everything, and you can check those, but there's quite a sort of manual process there. So how are you ensuring that you screen out hallucinations and you check the accuracy of the data you get back?
It is an ongoing challenge. And weirdly, it used to be easier. And the screening for accuracy is getting harder, not easier, because the models are getting better. So we had a project where we were using AI to kind of parse a load of content, and we started using GPT 3.5. So like, the first kind of chat GPT version back in 2023. And it was about 50% accurate at being able to extract scientific content. And obviously, we would check all of this content before we gave it over to our client. So we had this tool, and we're using GPT 3.5, and it was about 50% accurate, which meant the team was checking that, finding about half the things it got out of the content were wrong, and we had to correct that before we sent it over to our client. It was saving us time, but it was a lot of work to make sure that it was accurate. AI has gotten so much better that same process that we run now is about 95% accurate, which means when the team are checking it, it's almost always right. And therefore, you have a little bit of it looks right, oh, I'll just pass it through. And that's what we don't want to get to, is we don't want to get to a process where, because it's almost always right, you don't bother checking. So we have to constantly remind the team and work with the team to be like, has this fully been checked? Often that means getting someone else to check it, because you become a little content blind to the content you're working with. But it's not as bad as it was. It is much better, but it's a constant challenge. And obviously, we have to be responsible for the content we give our clients. We have yet to let an AI hallucination go through the process. We've caught them all so far. And touch wood, that never happens, but we just have to keep on top of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think this is a theme, or a topic rather, that we're going to see become very much more of a conversation for both clients and suppliers who are building these AI systems. I mean, I've had conversations about it a lot just this week. Two things which I've heard a lot are an increased focus on where you can bring the human into the loop, and building out processes, having spot checks, having the ability to run through checklists to understand what the risks are. But all of that sort of requires somebody to understand the principles and the risks. So it comes back to that education and skill point again.
Yeah.
But then the other thing which I've been hearing quite a lot of is sort of adversarial models, which reinforcement learning, you'll often have some adversarial models where there'll be, almost like one part of it that's checking up on the results that come out of the other part.
Checking the work of the other bits. Yes. Yeah.
Using an agent.
Which you get a lot now in I use the Codex, the AI coding tools, and you get different, you have your large model makes a plan, and then your smaller model writes the code, and the large model checks it. So that's becoming an automated process in code. I think in medical writing, I guess that would probably save a step if we had an AI check before it goes to the human checker, but you still then end up with that problem that the human checker is now catching the needle in the haystack and making sure that they still review all that content. But I think just an extra point on that, as I mentioned, is that when all the content that we produce goes to our client and then they put that through medical review, and to my knowledge, I would assume all pharma companies are still using human medical reviewers to do medical review. I think it would be very risky for them to move to AI to do that. But if they start moving to AI to do the medical review, then have you got any humans in the loop? That starts to get worrying, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, a bit of a side note there as well. I mean, I'm sure you've worked with quite a few of the regulators in this space, and you understand what that looks like. So, what the regulators I've spoken to more in the general digital space, by their own admission, I think they struggle to keep up with the AI the AI technology because it's evolving so quickly. And so that, I mean, is that what you're finding with the regulators in the pharma space as well? And have they, do you think there's any solutions for them to be able to become more effective as things continue to change?
I mean, it's a big challenge. So in the UK, we have the ABPI, which is the governing body that pharmaceutical companies join, and the ABPI code that they all agree to. The ABPI code was updated this year to add the ability to have, when you have a kind of large blocks of text on a poster, you can instead have a QR code. This was the first mention of QR codes in the ABPI code. It was hugely important in the digital forward pushing of these guidelines. So that was this year. So we can expect AI to make its way into the ABPI code by 2040, 2050 maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah, just after the year of mobile in like 2035 or something, right?
Yeah. So it is, it's some way off, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this I think has to be one of the things where industry can come together to help as well, because there's a lot of expertise in in AI, but also in pharma, and bringing the experts together to help set out what those principles could look like that should then be brought into regulation. I mean, that's something maybe the industry needs to take on board. Well, just as we kind of wrap up there, I wanted to ask you, what's the one thing that you're most excited about as you look ahead with what you're working on and what your clients are asking you to work on? What area of the industry are you most excited about?
That's a great question. I'm not sure it's exciting. I was playing with the Sora 2 AI video model yesterday, and that scared me because it is both great and terrible in the content it produces. It's very tuned to be crazy, like TikTok videos. So I don't think that's going to, as I say, get into our space anytime soon. Pharma is a long way away from TikTok videos. So that scares me a bit. What I'm more excited about is it's the really boring things. It's the AI that saves time, saves 20 minutes here or there, and allows people to do more interesting things with their jobs. Like, I do think it's a transformative technology, but not one that is coming to destroy us like the Terminator. It's something that's just, I like the phrase AI is normal technology. It's a normal technology that if we empower everybody to use it, everyone who's got their corporate version of Copilot uses it to save themselves 20 minutes here, 2 minutes there, and just like has a happier, more productive job. Brilliant. I think that's great. And anything I can do to help those teams do that, fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant. And it sort of comes back to this point we've been talking about, through the podcast today about everyday AI, that confidence and that's building that trust. But yeah, I like that phrase. AI is normal technology, and it should be, shouldn't it? It should be something that people just feel comfortable using rather than seeing it as this big magical thing that's going to always have transformative effects. Because sometimes, as you say, it is just the boring small things that are going to be for that organisation or right for that individual. Great. Well, James, thank you. Just lastly, then, can you tell us how can we stay in touch and find out more about Camino Communications?
Probably LinkedIn is the best place. We're Camino Comms on LinkedIn. I post quite a lot on there about AI stuff, but the company page talks a lot about what we do. We also are putting on an AI conference again for Pharma next year. We did one this year. Which your colleague Ben came along to, but we're doing it again next year. We haven't set the date. I can't say the date, but we're doing another AI conference for Pharma. We'll talk about on our LinkedIn page, of course.
Amazing. Great. Well, I think that's a really interesting space that you're in there. So definitely we'll be sending people your way as well as we are out there doing more things. And of course, we've got the life sciences groups coming up as well. And a huge bunch of
indeed. That's part of that, yeah.
So amazing. Well, James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.